Hey, welcome. Thanks for listening today, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Rocket Feather podcast. I am struggling today. This is the first solo podcast that we're putting together, and I really like being in conversation, and that's really been enjoying the previous episodes that we've recorded. And I feel really strongly about this particular topic, and I want to get better about talking about it and trying to explain it. And so I'm doing what I can today to highlight my solo voice around this idea of there being two different definitions of strength, and that one is fading away and one, I believe, is coming to the fore. And I'm really excited about how this new definition of strength has the potential, as we adopt it more and more, this new definition of strength has the potential to give us what we need to survive and thrive in a fraught world in the 21st century. And I know that this new definition of strength for myself and the people around me has already created better relationships, more ease, and frankly released some more energy, because this new strength doesn't require as much and is much more authentic and relaxed than the old kind. So real quick, everybody knows about the traditional definition of strength, right? Everybody knows about being strong, being able to be powerful and move things and create things and sometimes suppress things, right? Part of the old definition of strength was to be able to suppress one's own emotions or one's own reactions. It's like that dude took it on the chin, or that woman was so strong, she, lived in an alcoholic relationship for years and she didn't crack. So it involves suppression. It involves the imposition of will, right? The old kind of strength coming from, probably tribal times, right? When it was important to protect your family and your tribe. It was about imposing your will over somebody else. So it's power over. Traditional kind of strength is power over. And it plays out, as I was explaining, intrapersonally, right? The old strength in an intrapersonal way is like the British subjects during the British Empire, suppressing complicated emotions, suppressing one's own truth in order to be part of the collective, suppressing one's own authenticity or one's own needs. Sometimes it's discipline, but sometimes it's suppression and abnegation and loss of true self, right? But that got called strong. Like, that was really strong, the way you just suppressed your desires in order to be a part of the British Empire or 1950s New Jersey, whatever it was. And interpersonally, the way to be strong was to be there for somebody else and to help them out, or beat them up, right? Or to beat them in an argument in the court of law, or to beat them in academia with a better argument, being better read, being more completely educated. And it was always about a zero-sum game, right? Traditional strength relies on a zero-sum game. I win, you lose, I'm stronger. And it can even, that zero-sum game, I believe, even shows up in loving attempts to be supportive. I talked about this in my TEDx talk from last year, that oftentimes the way we've been trained to support people using the traditional model of strength is we either try and fix somebody else, we try and rescue them, we try and advise, or we project. And all of those methods, fixing you know what? The way you're thinking isn't quite right. Let me fix that. Let me adjust that for you. You're thinking about that wrong. Rescue. It's like, oh, let me take care of that for you. You don't need to worry about that. I've got it. Advising. Hey, what I would do if I were you, what you should do to take care of that. And projecting is all about either making it my problem or making it about me, or telling you about what I would do in your stead. all of those ways of being supportive involve this old kind of strength of presupposing that I, as the fixer, have more resources, better ideas, more stability or groundedness than you do. I'm stronger than you right in this moment, so I'm going to fix, I'm going to rescue, I'm going to advise, I'm going to project. Sometimes that feels welcome, but what it does is, again, it just maintains this hierarchy, right? It's like, I got it together, you don't. I'm strong, you're weak, at least in this moment. And that used to show up for me quite frequently until I studied nonviolence, academic nonviolence, studying Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Paulo Feire and the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I learned about the other kind of strength, the strength of the collective, the strength that is not necessarily active, but is receptive. It's not passive. And this is, I'll talk about this a little bit later in this talk about the misconceptions about the new strength, right? The image that keeps coming to my mind, and it's, it's from a movie, but it's at least somewhat historically based. The movie Gandhi, when they are attempting to, take over the salt mine or get through the salt mine. I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's hundreds of Indians, and they step up one at a time to get beaten down by the security forces, by the owner's men. And they just step up one at a time and get whacked by a stick. They do not raise their hands. They do not raise their fists. They do not lash out. And one by one, they're beaten and taken away until the security personnel are essentially morally and physically exhausted from this terrible repetitive act. And, lots of folks can say, well, it wasn't really that nonviolent movement that wrested India from the control of the British. But you can say, oh, it had to do with the Japanese and the war and blah, 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 and the decline of the empire or whatever. But you cannot deny that there is power in not acting out. And, Martin Luther King brought that to the States and showed it in Selma and other places how that looks as well. Now that's a little bit off to one side, but that's, I was studying that academically, and I was also learning about nonviolent communication with Marcel Rosenberg. I was learning about choice theory in interpersonal relationships and in particular in teaching relationships. And I was learning how to, when I was sitting in a circle of boys that I was mentoring, to not try and fix, rescue, advise, or project, but to just be present, right? That's what's left when I was learned to put down all of my tools, all of my masculine, assertive, active tools, and just be present, and to let a kid be in his or her own pain, shame, confusion, whatever it might be, and to just be there for that kid and be like, yeah, you're confused. I got it. Yeah, you're hurting right now. You don't know what to do. Yeah, you're struggling in school. I get it. Yeah, you don't like it. You want it to be different. Okay, I got it. And what started showing up for me as I came to understand that new kind of strength, I didn't know that it was strength at first, but what I started feeling in my body after learning to set down all these other tools, after learning to let myself be kind of vulnerable and kind of unarmed, was that I felt great. I felt really powerful. I felt awesome. I would walk out of a circle at a school or the juvenile justice center where I'd listened to really tough stuff and said very little and did nothing. And I'd walk out just slapping high fives to the angels. I felt great, and I couldn't really figure out why until I started understanding I felt strong by listening and being receptive and believing in that other kid and his abilities and capabilities, and by noticing my own strength in sitting in the face of terrible stories or wonderful stories without being moved to react and to try and do something, I felt strong, I felt powerful, I felt purposeful, I felt connected, I felt awesome. That's when I started seeing that there's this new kind of strength. And again, it's probably been around for generations. It's probably been around for thousands of years. But we've not privileged this kind of strength. We've called it passive. And in fact, when I and one of my business partners, we went to another city to try and explain and train men in how to do that kind of mentoring, how to do that kind of sitting and active witnessing, or not really active witnessing, just plain witnessing, presence, being present. One of the men in that training got really triggered. He's like, God, that sounds so passive. And he was really like his jaw gritted and his face scrunched up. And I make up that he was just really struggling with everything he'd learned about being a man and being powerful involved being active and assertive and changing things. And we were telling him to put all that down, to let it go. Well, then what the hell is he if he puts down all of those tools? What I'm saying is that on the other side of that pain and that vulnerability of putting down the idea of being active and changing things is this peace and ease and another kind of power that doesn't just rest in the biceps, doesn't just rest in the chest, but is, for me, really fully embodied. And it just makes me really happy. So I'd been doing that for a number of years, and then I started my relationship with my now wife, Kelly, and recognizing that I needed to bring more and more of that ability to be present into that relationship. Because Kelly's an only child. She doesn't need me at all. She doesn't need me to fix her, doesn't need any rescuing. She needs if she's going to live with somebody, she's got to have plenty of room to fully express herself. And frankly, if I'm going to live with anybody else, I need room to fully express all of my complexity, my highs and lows, my joys, my fears, my anger, my frustration, my despair. I don't need anybody trying to make it different. She doesn't need anybody trying to make her different. So we've really been practicing this validating in place, this like, yep, there you are. You're having joy right now. I see it. Yep, sounds like you're feeling really frustrated right now. Things are not going well for you right now. I get it. Kelly's going to fix herself. I do not need to fix her. Kelly's going to rescue herself. I'm going to take care of myself. I got plenty of resources. I don't need anything but space and attention and a witness. Being able to do that for Kelly involved me, because it's higher risk than working with kids, like letting Kelly be exactly who she is and not try to fix her or change her while living with her. Took more work initially for me. It took me doing more of that very same kind of strength building intrapersonally, developing my own ability to sit with myself, to sit with my joys, my fears, my anger, my frustration, and just have it wash over me and have it be okay. Robert Johnson talks about, I think it's in his book, where he talks about the Dionysian myth, if I'm remembering correctly. It talks about the difference between emotions and moods, and that emotions are powerful and constant, and there's more than one emotion going on at any one time in an individual, and that they can be kind of fleeting, and that's okay. Their response to what is in the moment. And according to him, where men in particular get stuck, is they get stuck in a mood, which is an emotion that lasts too long. And it can be a joyful mood, can be a positive mood, a positive emotion. But if that becomes a mood, if it becomes stuck, then it's narcissism or spiritual bypass, or mania, essentially. If it's a dark mood, if it's a dark emotion, if it's a sad emotion, then it's depression, The mood becomes depression or anxiety or ongoing fear, agoraphobia, inability to commit. So he counsels all of us, but in particular men, to just recognize emotions, notice them, let them wash, let them pass, know that they're going to come and go. So that was the intrapersonal strength that I started to develop 6 years ago, so I could be in a relationship with Kelly. And like I said, I'm seeing this happening more and more. I'm seeing more and more men in particular, and maybe it's just in my own Twitter and Instagram bubble, but I'm seeing more men in particular being willing to put down the tools that we were handed and to value ourselves even when we're being passive, to understand that strength can be receptive, that strength can be being still, that strength can be letting things, are you strong enough to let things be as they are right now? Can you handle that? Are you tough enough? Are you man enough to be okay with right where it is right now? And I don't mean being accepting of injustice, accepting of bad situations, but just being able to notice what's going on inside, between people, around us. Just notice, be strong enough, have your shoulders squared enough, my belly sucked in enough to just say, yep, I see it. I see it, and I can be here for the next, sometimes it's just a few seconds. Can I be here for a few seconds with Kelly, with my niece, with my coworkers, my mom? She'd be like, yeah, you're upset right now. Yep. You're not feeling safe right now. I got it. Rather than to try and fix, rescue, advise, project, tell somebody they're crazy, tell somebody they shouldn't feel that way. Notice the feelings that come up for me when Kelly is feeling really angry. If for me to be able to sit with her and be receptive, I'm noticing, wow, I feel really uncomfortable right now. I don't like being around her anger. I feel triggered. I want her to stop being angry so that I can feel safe. Okay, I got to square my shoulders for myself. Wow, okay, I'm feeling triggered right now. Am I big enough? Am I man enough to be triggered without doing anything? Right, those classic movie scenes where, somebody hits the strong guy and he doesn't flinch. Right, and we know that guy's really strong when somebody pulls a gun on the strong guy and he doesn't flinch. That's kind of mapping this new kind of strength on those old tropes, right? Am I strong enough not to flinch? Am I vulnerable enough to take something in without freaking out? So like I said, I'm seeing more and more of that, and I believe it's going to help us create a culture that's going to be sustainable. So I'm going to come back in part 2 of this podcast and talk a little bit more about how I see this playing out, how I see this new kind of strength playing out culturally and even globally. And we'll start with an example of when it didn't play out so well, in my opinion. Hey, thanks for listening. Be right back. So welcome back to part 2 of our first Rocket Feather solo episode. We're talking about strength, talking about traditional strength, old strength, the strength of power over, the strength of responding, the strength of trying to make things different than they are, and how we're seeing this new kind of strength rising, and how happy I am about that. I'm really happy to see that. And I want to talk about why I think this new kind of strength, this strength of being able to sit and listen, receive, not have to be assertive, this strength of power with, is going to contribute to a culture that will survive what's happening globally, the difficulties that are happening globally. So first I want to talk about this thing that's just been eating at me for almost 2 decades now, and it's an example of when I really feel like we did it wrong as a culture. I remember really clearly the morning of 9/11. I was working at a summer camp, or sorry, not a summer camp, a private school in Arizona, and by the time I knew about the planes hitting the World Trade Center, both towers I think were already down or very soon to be down, and it was very surreal. We were in the middle of this little desert place in the middle of nowhere. We had TV reception and cell reception and all that, but it felt very distant and separate. So I wasn't very emotional about it during the occurrence. We did have a couple of students there one who had a parent or an uncle who worked in the World Trade Center, and some others who were worried about some parents and loved ones in New York. And so I was there supporting those kids and being there for them. But I didn't feel horrified, and maybe that's something wrong with me, but I remember really clearly wishing, it was probably a day or two later, thinking about what I wish the response had been by the entire United States to what had happened when those towers came down. And my vision, my dream was that the president would declare, an 8-day period of mourning, a 9-day period. I don't know what the right number of days, but that we would mourn as a country. Those who were most directly affected, those who'd lost loved ones, would be comforted and supported and held up by the rest of us, and the rest of us who were feeling fear and anxiety would receive support as well, and that we would work together as a country to do that. And at the end of that 9 days, we would, on a particular morning, all stand together and face towards Saudi Arabia, which is where all of those attackers came from. They didn't come from Afghanistan. They didn't come from Iraq. That we would face Saudi Arabia and at the same time just raise our middle fingers and say, fuck you. You killed 3,000 of our countrymen. You killed 3,000 of our beloveds. And you cannot make us react. You cannot make us flinch. We are going to gather up the pieces. We are going to support these families. They are going to be without want. Every single one of those kids is going to have support and mentorship. Every single one of those wives and husbands is going to receive love and care. But you cannot, with your little dumb gesture, you cannot make us flinch. And of course, we know what happened. We did not choose as a country that new strength. We did not choose to square our shoulders and assert our collective humanity and to support our tribe. We lashed out. And we lashed out in a way that destroyed multiple countries. Over 600,000 civilian deaths, as far as I know. The tragedy, the ongoing tragedy in Syria is a not very indirect result of our invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. All of the effects that it's had on our country with the homeland security and the loss of civil liberties. All of it because we relied on the old model of strength. We're going to prove that we are stronger than you by having power over you, by imposing our will. And incidentally, one of the things that got lost in all of that was support for those people, some of whom were directly affected by that tragedy. It wasn't until 2 or 3 months ago that Jon Stewart was able to shame the Senate into reauthorizing funds for the first responders of 9/11 who were suffering all kinds of long-term health effects for operating in that environment. So the people who we should have taken care of we were so brittle that all of our attention went elsewhere. All of our attention went thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean and across the Persian Gulf. And we forgot our brothers and sisters right here. Spent trillions. And, incidentally, caused the current chaos that England is in, right? If it hadn't been for the invasion of Iraq, there wouldn't have been the refugee crisis from Syria. And there would not have been this right-wing reaction to immigrants that's happening in Poland, happens in Italy, and is one of the main causes for the debacle of Brexit. And frankly, I don't think we'd have the president we have today if we had chosen to operate under the new idea of strength. We are strong because we are woven together. We are strong because we can grieve together, and we are not afraid of our own grief. And we know that grief passes, and we will not dig ourselves into a mood of anger and vengeance and retaliation. That's not the way we chose to go. And that it breaks my heart. It still makes me mad, frankly. Makes me really disappointed in who we chose to be. But I am feeling more hopeful that we have the potential to learn that lesson and learn how to be strong together. David Roberts, who's one of my favorite climate change techno guys that I follow on Twitter, he was making this very same point, that as we move forward into more and more climate crisis, we have a choice. We're presented with the same choice. Again, how are we going to respond? Or are we going to respond by squaring our shoulders, accepting what is, accepting what has happened, accepting what is happening, and work to create a strength that is collective and that involves everybody and leaves nobody out and doesn't lash out at anybody, doesn't blame anybody? And that choice is going to be really important. Can we be strong enough to support one another and to hear brown people, to hear women, to hear young people who are angry? Are we strong enough, us old white guys, are we strong enough to hear the kids in the Sunrise Movement, to hear Greta Thunberg raving in pain and fear, and take that in and not try and shut it down because we're uncomfortable? Are we willing to be uncomfortable? Are we strong enough to be uncomfortable so that we can move forward in creative ways? Are we willing to create spaces for people whom we don't necessarily know how to get along with? Our future is multicultural. Our future is going to be a tapestry no matter what. That's just the demographic reality of it. Are we strong enough to sit across from somebody who looks different, who speaks with an accent, who expresses their sexuality or their gender in a different way, who is a woman but not like any other woman we know, is a man but is not like any other man we know? Are we strong enough to be present for that? Strong enough to recognize our own triggered reactions? Take a deep breath and lean in and let it be. And let the moment that we're in as a culture and as a species unfold in a way that is survivable and thrivable. Those are the questions that I have in my head, and now hopefully those are questions that you have in your head. I would love to hear your feedback about this episode. You can go to the anchor.fm/rocketfeather site and you can leave a voice message. Remember those voice messages? Or you can leave a comment on the website. You can also rate and review us on iTunes. Let us know if you'd like to hear more content like this. Let us know what comes up for you when we talk like this. Let us know what experiences you've had with the new kind of strength. It would be wonderful to be in community with more people who are exploring the strength of receptivity and the strength of listening. I feel so much better getting that off my chest. Thank you for listening. Let's move forward in some joy and ease and beauty and curiosity. Really appreciate you listening. Thanks so much.